So, welcome to the Center for the Less Good Idea. Most of you here know the center, but for those watching from further afield, to just explain. The Center for the Less Good Idea is situated here in Maboneng, downtown Johannesburg. And it's a space for artists, choreographers, dancers, writers to come together and see the energy that comes from collaboration. The title, the Center for the Less Good Idea, comes from a Tswana proverb: if the good doctor can't cure you, find the less good doctor. So it's about ideas from the periphery coming into the center. But particularly tonight, I'd like to welcome you to SO, which is the Academy of the Center for the Less Good Idea, in which different ideas which are emerging at the center or which are of interest to us get focused on specifically, with someone leading the exploration and different practitioners, students, or professionals working with this working with this practitioner to explore further the investigations. And tonight, Shane Cooper and I will be in conversation about a project for the SO Academy that Shane has been leading. All right, I'll start again. Okay. The Center for the Less Good Idea. The Center for the Less Good Idea, an experimental space in downtown Johannesburg, testing out the questions of collaboration. Tonight we're looking specifically at sound and the translation between word and sound, the creation of sonic space and sonic theatricality, and the Nagra tape recorder. And during the last months, Shane has been working with the other practitioners, examining what can be done with the Nagra, with recording, cutting, chopping, and seeing how this can be transformed. So one takes sound which has meaning and destroys the meaning and sees what results. One can play with stretching things out so they become slow and quiet, or speeding the same things up to see what happens as the material changes. So it's using the physicality of sound as the raw material in which to think. And taking this raw material and allowing it to be cut up and chopped and changed. Happenstance is the title of the project that Shane has been working on, and it's in 4 chapters, and we'll be talking about the 4 chapters that has been made. The first is called Static. The second chapter is called Skin. Then there is Tongues, and then there is Echotones. But that's enough of an introduction, and we'll talk further about it and the collaborators that Shane has been working with. And cut.
And cut.
So, Shane has been working with this Nagra tape machine. When I was a generation older than Shane at least, and so when I started working in film, that was the standard machine for recording sound. And for editing sound, the process of cutting it with a razor blade and sticking it with sticky tape was the standard way of doing it. And in the project that Shane has been working on now, it's very much about that physical activity of splicing and cutting and gluing. So it has to do with something that is held in your hands and not simply something that is a series of digital files.
Exactly.
So I'm happy for you to talk while you're doing, but it's important to know that what Shane is going to do now, or you talk about what?
So I thought that introduction was beautiful, but we could also try to rearrange his words, rearrange some of the bass lines. So perhaps A good way to do that is to go about splicing different sections of the tape together without mapping it out,
And this
randomly
is
chopping.
techniques that you used in the happenstance project.
Exactly. Throughout the different chapters, I used it at various points to generate aleatoric material so that I could encourage kind of a random interaction with the source material so that so that the material wasn't always pre-predicted by my own habits, my own sort of patterns, let's say that.
So by aleatoric, you mean chance.
Exactly.
So okay, well, let's rather watch the process.
Okay, so I recorded that at 15 inches per second, so roughly, I guess that's around 15 inches or so. That would be 1 second. So I'm going to chop, because of the kind of material we were doing, I'm going to chop pieces that are fairly long.
So it's about also turning time into distance. So it's time which is recorded on this tape. So in Hollywood terms, if you've got a piece of film, you would say that is the length of a screen kiss. And if you're an editor, you would say, all right, that's the length of a really extended screen kiss. And so there's a way in which actually holding the pieces of film or the pieces of tape gave you a sense of time in your hands, which could be arranged, rearranged, trimmed, cut. And in this case, because you can't actually look at this like a piece of film and know what the image is, you know that somewhere all the material has been recorded on this metal oxide tape with magnetically altered the arrangement of the tape. You're taking it on trust.
100% trust, and that's the beauty of it. The most exciting part of this is the first time you play it. So I have no idea how the order will end up with your words, but also with my bass parts. And sometimes one can either use that in a finished recording or actually use that as a composition tool.
So you can see here, each time you see a little blue mark, that's the adhesive tape that holds the different fragments of the tape together. So it's cut at an angle, so you don't get a big blip as it passes the heads of the tape recorder. And then it's simply glued together. And it can be glued either running forwards, or if you reverse the tape, the sound is now running backwards.
And then the playback speeds as well.
So you can run it at, what is your normal playback speed?
Well, for this recording, it was 15 inches per second, so I could go half or a quarter.
So that's like 38 centimeters per second. So you could either do 1 second, or if you're doing it at double speed, it's half a second, or at half speed, 2 seconds. And the pitch would drop as you do it. So already what starts to happen is that you have a whole lot of things that are related to the recording, but which aren't identical to the recording, that can start to teach you things about what the recording is.
It's very much like making a collage, I guess, but all the source material you captured as well. Yeah.
So there are 2 stages, which we'll look at after this introduction. This is the introductory part, and then we get to the real project. Is that you've got the stage of gathering the raw material, either with either found material or recording it live.
Exactly. So sometimes it's found material, but a lot of what I normally capture in this particular project is either musical or nature sounds. So I've recorded a lot of frogs and crickets and things like that, which is quite fascinating at half speed and quarter speed as well, especially when you combine frogs, crickets in various levels of distance. It's quite fascinating.
There was a project I saw a report of once, which was a person who'd recorded a whole lot of bird sounds in England. Can't remember his name. And then what they did, so it's, the sounds are very high-pitched, very fast bird sounds, and they slowed that down approximately 20 times, so that your bird sounds then became sort of whoop, whoop, yee, whoop, whoop. And then he got some singers, very good singers, to sing what he'd heard at this 25 times slowed down. And they sang this thing with a whoop, yeep, whoop, and with the timbre of a proper singer. And then when that was done, they played it back 25 times faster. And you had these singers moving very jerkily, because it was also videotape, making these perfect bird sounds.
Wow.
So I was interested in if I just got singers and got them to say, play them one bird, and say, all right, now make your own bird, a whole new series of species of birds with your different slow songs, which get speeded up till they hit a bird cadence.
I love that. In fact, we have Sakile Moleshe here in the audience tonight who featured on the vocal chapter, which we'll speak about more later, and he's a phenomenal whistler. So we have some wonderful whistlers in the work, so thanks for some inspiration with that.
So it would be interesting to take his whistling, slow it right down, give it to some of the wonderful singers to sing it at that slow down speed and see what it is turned back into a whistle. Okay, so this is...
Never done this in front of a live TV audience before.
That was all to fill up the space of while this actual splicing was happening. If this is a disaster, we did do a safety one earlier with a rehearsal, and we can compare them.
Okay. What's great for me, because of course I come from more of a digital generation, is that this has pulled me away from the computer to a device that just does sound. No emails, no social media, no communication. And it's been a wonderful way of focusing my mind. And I will continue to do this much more. So let me spool it around here. Actually, I've got to spin this guy. I made a slightly shorter one, but for that pre-made one, we made a very, very long one.
We can take it down.
You can take it down. Thank you. So this might be a bit closer, William. Let's see. So shall we bring it a bit closer?
Okay.
Let's try that. Okay. Voila. This is a very good Merlot, which we'll have later. Okay. All right.
I'll
So
do
a little bit more tension.
Okay.
Great. You guys ready?
Yeah.
Yeah. Whoa. Okay. I know what happened. That was my bad. I used too much of the end of the tape after we'd spoken.
Do we go back?
Should we play that one? Okay. Let's do the pre-cooked. Let's do the pre-cooked. Apologies for that, guys. Okay. There we go. But that's all part of the process. The mistakes as well. Okay.
So I know it looks it, but in fact that mistake was not pre-planned.
Okay, so this is a bit longer now, William, so I'll double up with you with a second bottle of wine in a second.
I can shift further away. Oh, it's longer. Okay. Okay, we'll do it this way. There we go. That's it. Yeah. That's fine. I'll hold it.
Right. Okay. So, if you can sort of...
I'll hold it here.
And I'll jump to the situation in a moment.
Okay.
Ready?
Yeah, I hope so. Of the Center for the Less Good Idea. The idea that ideas from the periphery will come in and they will give meat and heart to a good doc. Process of you. Verb, which is the Academy of the Center for the Less Good Idea. The idea that ideas from the periphery will come in and they will give meat and heart to a good doc. Process of you. Verb, which is the Academy of the Center for the Less Good Idea.
Great.
Okay.
So should I maybe play a couple of the
I think
shorter loops
yes,
as well?
Yes.
The musical ones.
So this was, I hope, to give a sense of the process which is undertaken, as well as the ideas which can be generated
Exactly.
from it.
So I'll play a
Just move
few...
Okay, do you need it? Okay.
I'll play a few of the musical examples. So in this, I have just a random selection of tape loops I'm I know there's all sorts of instruments, stuff that we recorded specifically, so everything from traditional mouth bows to pianos, Fender Rhodes, percussion, all sorts of stuff. So I'll just randomly select. Would you like to select one? See what we get. So it might be a good one that I used. It might be one that was sort of, okay. It's not too bad. There we go. Let's see. All right. And what I do is I just sit late at night and chop up loads and loads of these. And then the best part, as I say, is when you play it for the first time. And none of these things I would be able to do on a computer. None of them I would be able to come up with just off the top of my head to compose. So it's very generative.
Do you want me to hold that?
Yeah, thanks. Great.
Oh. Perfect. Okay.
Okay, very good. And it's actually altering because of the tension he's putting on the bottle as well, which is quite nice. So you can give it a little more slack. There we go. Pitch is revealed. And now, if I slow it down, let's say half speed, 7.5 inches per second. And then let's say a quarter speed, so this is 3.75 inches per second. And the more you listen to it, the more you kind of tune into the cycle and what's happening, you know? The noise is part of it for me as well. It's not meant to be clean. Yeah. Thanks, William.
Okay.
So you get the idea. So
like
there's lots of this kind of stuff.
I feel like the conjurer's assistant, which a rabbit will come out of the hat.
And yeah, I can't actually tell you because that was quite a new thing for me. I've been working on tape prior to this project, but this was the first time I actually had all of these apparatus that you really need to do loops in a way that aren't going to damage the machine. So I got quite absorbed by that process.
So the three central collaborators in this Academy moment with you were Mantate Masebe, Kanisile Peterson, and Lekona Tsamane. Mm-hmm. And they were musicians. Who were they?
They're all musicians, creators. They work in various genres and fields. And basically, So Academy is an opportunity, at least in this instance, to have some incredible people on board assisting me with the process, learning by being part of the process in a very practical way. They were essential to all of the very detailed practicalities on all of these days. And we have all these remote sessions where I show them post-production and things like that as well.
And the hope would be that that's part one of this academy, and part two is the participants making their own work using some of the techniques and insights gained in this workshop process.
Exactly.
So maybe later on we can hear from those participants how that felt from the inside. But let's talk about this specific project. So it's 4 chapters.
Exactly.
Maybe give us a rundown, and I know you have some fragments of them which we can also look at and listen to.
Yeah, so I've got some images and I have some sounds. So effectively, the 4 chapters together are called happenstance. The reason is that a fundamental principle of all of these processes is to create moments of chance. I've used it in composition for years. It's one of my main ways to get away from patterns and habits that I have that I tend to find myself getting into these ruts with. So a lot of what I do, I mean, Mozart was doing hundreds of years ago, but drawing random sequences of harmonic progressions, chords, and things like that, I do those generally. So we implemented those not only on a sort of theoretical compositional way, but also with a device. So instead of us going to a big studio with 16,000 microphones and many channels, I wanted to use this machine with only 2 microphones at any time. So we played around and we recorded everything in the center here, except for chapter 4, which we'll get to. So we use different rooms. So the chapter that launched today, a few hours ago, is called Static, which I'll play you a bit of now.
And that's on the website of the Center for the Less Good Idea.
And on YouTube at the moment as
YouTube.
well. Yeah, and from tomorrow, Spotify, iTunes, and those sort of places.
Okay.
So that chapter was recorded in this room. So not only are we talking about aleatoric information in terms of musical content, but we can hear the highway through the wall, which I love. So a lot of the overarching sort of aim with this was to encourage texture and noise in things, not to get this hyper clean, modern digital sound. So in some of the recordings throughout chapter 1, you hear cars on the highway. There was a guy who was revving his car incessantly while Bokani and Kara were doing a piano duet. And I love it because it kind of brings in these other frequencies and it pulls you into a sort of surrealist realm, which I thought was interesting. So we used this machine. We used only 2 microphones at any time. And then I took this material back and did more in post-production, which we'll speak about in a second. So it was, what was that shortcut again? Can't recall. So let me just find it again.
Fine.
So this is the trailer for chapter 1. Great. So in chapter 1, we had 3 amazing performers who I think are all here tonight. Bokani Daya on piano. Cara Stacey, who is performing the PVC flute there, but she performed a whole smorgasbord of traditional Southern African instruments as well as piano. And Daliwonga Changelo on cello. Are you here, Daliwonga? No, but a round of applause still. And this episode was the first one that came, when I set out to do this project, this episode was the first one that my imagination delved into. This whole project stemmed from a tape collage piece I did some months ago, which was inspired by early tape music, you know, from the 40s, from before, from people like Halim Al-Dab, and going on to all of the music concrète and all of that music, but in a modern way with my own kind of sensibilities, you know. And these 3 performers I wanted to bring together because of sonority, but also the huge variety of sounds that these instruments bring, you know. So let me jump in to this a little bit, and I'll play some. But of course, this first episode is 20 minutes long. It's one piece. I encourage you to listen to it in its entirety. It's designed like that, and with nice headphones or speakers if you can, not on a cell phone, you know. So make a cup of tea, and you can do that. I'll play just some sections of it. Of course, that was a little bit of it. So here you're going to hear Kara playing some of the mouthbow. It's the umrube, is that right? Yeah. And with it, because of these beautiful overtones, these whistling melodies that come out on top of the fundamentals, I recorded a lot of Joburg nature sounds of crickets and frogs and at various pitches. So it became, to me, a call and response of these kind of voices, you know. And it goes on, and slowly the nature sounds become more and more in the foreground. And what you start to hear is eventually her actual performance of the bow playing deconstructs into one of these tape loops. So you'll hear a section now where you hear more of the nature sounds in the front, and then these snippets of her performance kind of reimagined. So. You hear those little bits. So things like that were really fun to play with in sort of different dream spaces to me. This is really supposed to be a surrealist sound dream. I guess it's the opposite of a silent movie. It would be like an invisible movie in a way, you know?
I think what you're saying there is very, very interesting because in this world of sonic theatre, or of radio, as it just used to be, where you get given only a sound cue, and all the rest is your imagination, to see the door slamming, to hear the things falling, to watch the whole film in your head, which you're constructing. So you're aware that everybody has the same sound source that's coming into them, but everybody's kind of imagining their own particular film. Their image of where the frogs are, their image of where the mouthful is.
Exactly, yeah.
And so I think, as the centre goes on in this coming year, the idea is to do more work in this sonic terrain. I think it's one of the things we've learned from a year of lockdown, or what are the sort of things that function well in the space of no physical contact. And so things that were radio or sound is one of the areas. So I'm sure this is the beginning of something that at the centre, I hope, Pala, you must tell me if it's, we would be expanding further and having further developments of what sonic theatre could be. There's a possibility of a collaboration with people working on sonic theatre in London. I'm sure there'll be a kind of an enlarged piece. And also interesting to think of the possibilities of this having been taken out of the performance world into the tape world, returning back onto stage, whether it is 12 people holding different bottles of wine with different machines playing different loops, and you running around like changing all the loops as we go, which you had a bit of in season 2 with Bettina Malcolmes. But, okay, sorry, let's go back to, should we go into chapter 2?
Absolutely, yeah.
And chapter 2 will be released in a few weeks' time? Or?
So every Wednesday following from today, the successive chapters are released. So chapter 2 is next Wednesday, chapter 3 the following, and chapter 4 the final one then. Unless there are hiccups, which there was today, hence why Spotify and iTunes and that only come out tomorrow. Yeah. So, we're going to do some Q&As at the end, unless it's...
It's just an interesting thing that Lynn just spoke about, here in architecture, and a lot of the big buildings that are going up now in Johannesburg, there's
desensitization. Okay.
Wow.
This music is definitely being introduced so that you don't have a pre-memory or notion or emotion attached to a sound you've heard before.
Wow.
Okay, I think
Interesting. Very interesting.
that's completely interesting about what that is, but we'll get back to that at the end, so we follow through, but we will not forget. Thank you.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I'd love to talk about that.
Okay. So this is chapter...
Whoopsie, sorry.
This is chapter 2. Which
Exactly.
is called Skin, but there's a trailer also.
Yeah.
Should we watch the trailer?
Okay, we'll watch the trailer. So this is chapter 2, Skins. So chapter 2 is titled Skins, and it features 3 amazing percussionists, Jonse Makene, Jono Sweetman, and Mika Manganya. They're incredible percussionists. I just remembered that quite a deliberate thing that I planted in each of these is that there was always one member of the 3-person ensemble that I hadn't really worked with much, and the other 2 I had, to create a certain dynamic that I wasn't too familiar with as well. So in this instance, Jono and Jonse I've worked with a lot. Mika I hadn't met prior to the day, and that adds a certain spark. But those third people were researched heavily. I spent probably 6 weeks deciding on the final people for this project because the dynamics between them and the chemistry was essential, and sort of simulating that in my head.
And that also got recorded on tape and chopped up.
100%, everything. So,
and then is that layered? In other words, you have one loop, that's one sound. In the mix, do you then have another loop and you say, well, let's put those 2 loops together, or is it always single loops?
It's a big combination. So I think I'd like to actually play an example to demonstrate that question from Static in a moment, because when I get to post-production, it's a layering of modern techniques and tape techniques. So some moments, for me, it's kind of, the process starts to reveal itself as I dive in, and I start to see a form unfold. And then I commit to that form. So certain areas start to sing true to me in a more analog process, and those I devote to a very, very stripped down tape process where I encourage noise, I encourage these very randomized rhythmic loops. And other things I take back and I hear and I go, I want to get orchestral on this. So there's a moment in Static where Daliwonga was playing this really powerful dissonant chord sequence, bowing it on the cello. And I heard that and I thought I have to layer this orchestrally. So I then bowed 3 double bass parts on top of that. I added Fender Rhodes, I added guitar, all of these things to make it very wide, so that then when you come back down to a stripped down moment of just tape, it's a very potent effect. And that for me just meant I could let these songs be fully realized to what I consider their true form, you know? So a real hybrid. But the days of recording were 100% analog, which yielded some challenges as well. I actually lost some of the tape on this particular day, on the Skins day, because of some technical glitches. But those we had a second digital backup for in case. Thank goodness.
So we had the opposite in my studio, where 2 dogs ran wildly through the studio and pulled a cable and pulled a hard drive with days of filming on it onto the floor, which smashed, and we did not have an analog backup of that.
Oh my goodness.
So it's, both are vulnerable, and I would suspect that the analog is safer than the digital.
In a lot of ways, yeah. It's true.
I mean, I know with images, with film, the average lifespan, or they say the expected lifespan of a digital file, if you filmed your stuff on digitally, is 3 years. Every 3 years you should replace it. And the average life expectancy of something on paper, if it's kept reasonably, is 600 years. And I wouldn't say that these are going to last 600 years, but compared to some of the digital formats like that.
Yeah. In fact, this tape stock is from 2000, so it's already 20 years old. And some of it had been taped on 20 years ago and was still working great for these sessions. So,
are we going to hear more of Skins?
We
do you want to go on to Tons?
I was going to play you a little bit of, to just revert back to that discussion around tape loops. I'll play you a section of Static, which is an ensemble of tape loops on top of one another. Okay, and here, essentially, the noise, so if I turn this around for you, I mean, some of you will know this if you're in the audio world, but every device has what's called a noise floor, right? So if I'm singing very softly into the microphone, then I turn this up, and that will turn up the inherent noise floor in this, which is just a little bit of hiss and kind of machine noise and stuff like that. So some of the things that I deliberately looped were perhaps recorded too softly or played too softly with the microphone far away, and the volume controls turned up very high. So there's a lot of noise and hiss, and the hiss is almost up here, and the actual piano sound is down here. And this, to me, I find interesting because it then becomes the lead character, the noise and the faults, rather than the perfect capture. So,
I mean, that's interesting just in terms of the broader thing when we talk about the Center for the Less Good Idea, about ideas from the periphery, which are not the first idea, finding the way into the center and becoming some of the key ideas in it. We always had an idea for a concert which would be someone playing the piano, a classical piece of piano, and then there'd be the noise in the street, in Main Street and in Fox Street, and the band from the club at Genelec, and maybe there's people singing, a choir that sings. And in fact, what the concert is are all those external things that you think are disturbing the central concert. So
those are the main characters?
Yeah, so that's a project for us to remember. Okay.
So, just finding the point. One of the big things I was speaking about to the mentees in this is the moments of transition. Because often that was what, in Static, for example, I captured a full day of recording, but it ends up as a 20-minute piece of music. And it's not that I everything they performed was beautiful. So it was how to choose what to use. And a lot of it was decided about how things transition. So I would sometimes spend 5 hours working on a transition because I saw potential, only to realize I was forcing it. Pull it out, try something else, and then find that. So this is a moment of that kind of transition. A little bit of what you're hearing in this exit from somewhere is what's called a sound-on-sound loop. So these loops we were showing you are rhythmic loops, basically, or rhythm loops. And sound-on-sound is where you basically loop and you keep recording over and over. And it's what modern loop pedals, for those of you that know, do, but it's much less clean. So basically, you would be speaking over it, and every time the previous iterations get darker and darker, and kind of misty and degraded, which is quite interesting. So a lot of what you're hearing in this exit is some of that. You hear the little crackles and the clicks of tape and things like that. That's a reverse glockenspiel at the end there. So this is Cara playing one of her mirrors, but pitched down, So now what you're going to hear is a bunch of piano loops coming on top of each other with different kind of interplay. Same one, slow it down. So these kind of little dances with micro ensembles in a way. And that part of the static name has several kind of connotations, but part of it is actually that tape noise, playing with that sort of thing. Yeah.
Should we go on to echo tones?
Great, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Which is the fourth chapter, which is very different to the others.
Or should we do chapter 3? We still
Okay.
Yeah.
We can...
So I'll do a brief trailer of chapter 3.
Oh,
chapter
yes.
3 was with vocalists.
Okay.
It's called Tongues. We had Sakile Moleshe. How's it? And Messina, who's here somewhere.
And hi.
And Zoe Modicha, who is not here. She's at a video shoot, but... So this is... Each of these I'm basically finishing just before they're kind of loaded to the internet. So Tongues is the one that is the furthest back in the process. To me, it's more in the clay form now. There's a lot of shaping. So what you're hearing in this is the camera microphone, not the actual processed sound. That's just what it is, yeah. So that was upstairs with lots of reverb. That was recorded upstairs with loads of reverb and lots of highway sound as well, so a little interplay there.
Yeah, I mean, but what it does is it gives you a fantastic raw material with which to start
Exactly.
composing. So instead of starting composition as it might have been either just at a keyboard or just from your head and writing things down on a stave, to actually start with that as the raw material, which can be, much as if an artist working with collage might start with a series of photographs of images or fragments and seeing how they fit together. And that sense of understanding the world as collage, not only as technique, but understanding how we live in a world of collage. We're always having to take fragments and make some coherence, whether it's sound fragments or visual fragments or fragments of news and fragments of phone calls. From them all, we have to make a kind of coherence. So I think what this process does is it makes very visible what otherwise, which is a natural, it makes visible what is otherwise a very invisible but natural process.
Absolutely. I love that. I think also, I'd be curious to ask some of the performers, but the environment perhaps is fairly similar to, let's say, a live recording where you're doing a concert recording, but typically in a studio, you have a lot more control over all the various factors that play a role. The acoustics in the room, having headphones on all the performers, sort of being in the comfort of all these digital conveniences. And in this instance, we didn't allow that as a result of just using this unit. So it meant people were, I think, more engaged in a way with the acoustics in the room, with the space, or at least that was my hope. Whether they felt like that, I'm not sure. But for myself, I was also performing on some of the works as well, and I felt a massive difference in being involved with something that was so limited to capture those collage pieces, rather than having, I think, a million tools at my disposal in the beginning capturing phase, It also means that when I'm in the phase of putting together and assembling these collage bits, I have to use that. That's it, And it allows me to really focus on what's good and even find the gems in the moments that are in between the obvious moments, So just to talk a little bit about the original intention behind, some of the original intention behind these 3 episodes, it was sort of floating over, was to try something where you could play all 3 on top of each other as a sort of new experience. And as I started working on them individually, I realized they had their own souls and kind of couldn't work in tandem. They had to just go their own way. So, on that note, chapter 4 is really its own episode. Ecotones. It's with an amazing ecological artist, Sarah Khan from Cape Town. And let me start with the chapter. This one doesn't have sound, but then I'm going to play you a bunch of sound. Okay. So you'll just I'll play some of it to show you some of the behind the scenes.
So do you want to, is there camera sound or are you going to?
No, not on this, but I'll talk through it. So she's in, I don't want to, a shortchange her, but she does so much incredible work. I think she's watching now from home. Hello, Zayan. So she works with food, she works with plants, she works with land. She does incredible fermentation workshops, all sorts of fascinating stuff. Really find her online and check her work out. But we've created this about 24-minute episode that we're working on now, which jumps from spaces of sort of sound walks where I'm following her on the rocks and capturing everything very vividly with beautiful microphones as she harvests kelp and seaweed and things like this, to going into the flay and squelching through mud, and you're hearing her footsteps and you're hearing her pick leaves and flowers off of trees and smell them and taste fruits, to moving to the kitchen, preparing ingredients, preparing different fermentations, preparing homemade sodas, all of these things, all recorded in hyper vivid color. That wasn't using this machine, this was using the kind of 2020 version of this that they use on film sets. And we recorded her speaking through recipes, through memories, through poetry, all sorts of things that touch on, I think, very personal experiences for her, but also matters around land, matters around ecology, and things like that. And we're weaving it together in a way that kind of jumps from very informative to quite poetic to very dreamlike. So let me play an example of that. This is one of my favorite bits. This is called Acha for Papa. Acha for Papa.
My love gifted me a bag of kumquats that sat gazing at me for a week. Bright and plump oval balls of sour. I finally take them and split them in half. This can be along any hemisphere, as long as they are split mostly equal. I throw them in a bowl and add enough salt to draw out their liquid and power up their flavor. I suppose it's a teaspoon. Now fold the salt in with the kumquats, gently, with honor and grace, so all the salt meets all the kumquat. I pull down the jar of the last of the acha masala I like to buy from my two favorite shops, one in Johannesburg and one in Cape Town. You could make your own from so many spices: kalonji, ajwain, bori, mustard seed. If you have none of these, at least it must have roasted chili, and it must have meti. It always has salt. Open up this jar and take a deep breath. These spices should draw up stories through your nostrils, enough for memories, enough for future recipes of the past. The smell sits firmly on a small yellow formica table in a kitchen with yellow wooden wall panels and built-in cupboards. The smell is in a small pickle bowl next to the chicken curry and a pile of plated rotis, closest to my grandfather's setting. The smell is on a Friday afternoon, mixed up just before the men come from Jummah prayer.
So that summarizes some of the approach. We jump. So in a way that gives you, an estimation of how it flows from these recipes to, we'll do these sound walks and things, to these dream spaces. And we're trying to keep it dynamic in that way so that you get through 24 minutes and you feel like you've gone through a lot of different kind of channels, Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, how does that relate to the others? On various kind of conceptual levels, a lot of what I was thinking about within all of these chapters was micro and macro sounds and the relationship of frequencies and rhythms. Because any frequency, if you slow it down, it has a different kind of rhythm and things like that, and how these dance. And so a lot of what we've captured in this chapter is very vivid sounds of her opening fermentation bottles and things like that, which sound incredible at various speeds. So we're kind of orchestrating these sounds. So everything's linked in some way. Yeah.
I think that gives us a fantastic sense of what the project, the process, and how it's made. Maybe at this stage it's a good point to take questions, if there are questions, to maybe ask some of the participants to, if they have things they'd like to say about it. It would be interesting to hear.
And there's a microphone they'll pass around.
Is there a microphone?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
There's a question here.
Great.
And then I quickly became shy.
Keep it close to you. Keep it close to
Testing,
you.
1 2 1 2.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's more, rather than a question, more compliment. A lot of what you're doing relates to us, and I mean, we are musicians by no means. Okay. But a lot of it, like what I'm picking up, is a lot of like Hans Zimmer.
Yeah, I love Hans.
Do you draw a lot of inspiration from him?
I love Hans, but I love a lot of film music composers in general. I think it has a certain
story narrative.
Yeah, exactly. That's very inspiring to me, and a project like this has a particular openness to that way of writing.
And
Yeah,
thinking.
which isn't necessarily something I would do with, let's say, a band playing on a stage or something. So,
And that's definitely what we've been picking up the whole evening, is that there's a definitive story narrative through all of your music.
Absolutely.
And how interesting is that music isn't just sound, but and I think William, when he started off the introduction, it's definitely that. It's an introduction, it's a picture that you paint, and you paint it so beautifully.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The question here.
So congratulations to the two of you. So it's a sort of Russian doll question, if you will permit me. So you, my brother, have publicly admitted to being unfamiliar with the musical dissonance and your idea of the ancestral moment for transition, fragmentation, and collage. So I'm interested to ask, how can you talk about a quote-unquote stripped-down musicality? And I think it's interesting to think about musicality and masculinity. There seems to be quite a lot of women who are present in your work, and that you can appreciate a true form. What does a true form mean? When you say a true form, which I heard you say, which I quoted,
Oh, yes, how did you?
what do you mean by a true form? What is a true form? And then lastly, it's an unexpected comment that I didn't think I would hear from you, but you are young, and do you know enough of your musical history to make these kinds of decisions about what musical form is? And when you are experimenting and using your experience, is experimentation and experience, are they not intertwined? So I'm really curious about those sorts of things. And
So, I mean, there are many questions there.
Yeah,
Let's take a couple.
Yeah.
So the one is about musical form. What makes you feel confident saying this is a...
Well, of course, there's no right or wrong. It's a personal thing. The thing is, I'm making music first because I have a personal hunger to do so. I share it with the world. But first, it's a personal journey. That's why I make music, right? So for me, over the years, what's become evident as part of my process, at least at this point, and who knows, it could change, is that while I'm carving, because to me, analogies to visual art, sculpture, or whatever, are very fitting to working with music and working with sound. So for me, my starting point, whether it's raw materials, or a basic idea, or a chord progression I come up with, that's just a block of stone or wood that I need to shape in order to get it to what I consider a song or a piece of music. So that's my start. And usually the thing that motivates me to continue with that versus another stone is just a very strong personal connection to it. It excites me and makes me want to return to it day after day. That's it. If I don't feel that, I'll move on and try something else. There's no point in forcing it, right?
I mean, the other thing I would suggest in response to some of the questions is that I think you would like a clear answer, and I think the answer is there isn't a clear answer. All of those things, masculinity, how that relates, I mean, very aware that here are two men sitting on the stage in this episode, but let it be said that the two other workshops, the two other So moments we've had, are both directed by women. Teresa Majola is doing a dance academy at the moment. Greta Goiris was doing a costume academy. Before the last public discussion we had here was with Pala and Jane Taylor. So it's something that the centre is aware of, it becoming too much of one thing. And when we do stray, we are certainly open to hearing, hang on, this is too many men speaking, we need a... So we do try to, it's not a question, of course, it can't not be a question.
Yeah.
But in this case, I'm afraid it's us. Guilty as charged, men.
If I could, William,
Yes.
just to sort of close off the finished form thing. So it's a personal thing, and so what I've found in my process over the years is that at a certain point, the shape, it's one of the great artists used to say that the shape would start to reveal itself in the stone, And so it's like that for me. At some point, the kind of what I consider, I could call it the soul of the song or something, starts to help inform me about what decisions to make. And that's just an esoteric way of seeing it, but that's the feeling I have while in the studio working on this. And it sort of starts to go, come this way, and that helps me shape it to the end. And that's just a feeling. That's not a fact, that's my feeling. That's what gets me through to the end. So at some point, what I consider its true form, because it's something I'm thirsty to see it through, At some point, that true form, it's like the mist clearing, and slowly I see it, and then I walk towards that, and I keep shaping it. And at some point, I go, now I can see it clearly. It's no longer blurry. The intention behind this, wherever that came from, whatever cosmic root that may have been, or influences, or memories, or dream spaces that kind of formed the DNA of that, at that point, I can say, it's HD now. It's vivid. And then I let it go. And that's the true form for me. If that's right or wrong for someone else, I'm not sure. But for me, that's when I can let go. Because letting go, Sting said, a song's never really finished, you just let go. And that's my let go point.
I mean, they also do said more of visual artists than musicians maybe, that every artist needs someone standing behind him with a hammer to let him know when it's finished. Because from the inside, it's very difficult. You often need some external thing which is, okay, stop. You've got a deadline or it's got to be done. And to accept that things have a provisionality. Yes, they're finished, you've shaped it like that, but that's a moment. It could shift. Yes, there's a question.
Thank you for this introduction to the physics of sound. If I can go back to the very beginning and thank William for his explanation of the name of the Center for the Less Good Idea, because it's always puzzled me. And if it's in English translation from the Titswana, if at first the good doctor doesn't succeed, then try a less good doctor. For me, it's very reminiscent of my countryman, Samuel Beckett, and it's lovely to see the Center for the Less Good Ideas rendition of the tree from Waiting for Godot. And I had bought tickets, but unfortunately didn't make the actual performance. So I don't know if the decorations have been added appropriately in green for Christmas coming up. Perhaps they were already there. But Beckett, in contrast to saying, if at first you don't succeed, try again. Beckett said, if at first you fail better next time. So I like that, as it were, analogy with the cross-cultural translation.
I mean, just as a word on that, we are very aware of that connection. This is the second Beckett. We did a group of Beckett plays at the start of the season. Pala Ukuditse Pala is the director of this current production of Waiting for Godot, which we hope we can revive and show again next year when we do our delayed season 7. Season 7, with 40 different interventions and performances, was scheduled for April the 1st of this year, and that was 4 days after our lockdown. And it's scheduled for March of this coming year, when we hope we are still in a state where even with reduced audiences like this, we can show the full season. We'll most probably perform in larger spaces, the space upstairs, the other space at the end, so we can accommodate more people. But I want to say an enormous thank you to you for being almost for me, the first audience I've been with. I was away when the Godot was done. But to be coming back to having the confidence and the wish to come back to to the center. And I speak, I think, on behalf of Pala, who is our animateur, which is to say the person whose responsibility is keeping the energy as well as the direction of the center going, on behalf of Pala and all the team who work with him. An enormous thank you for it. I think we must probably have time for 2 more questions, or one more question, and then we will end it. And I also want at this point to say a big thank you to the audience online, who are those people who are watching online. It will also be recorded, and it will in due course be on our website if people want to send it on. It won't be immediately. I think it will take a while for the video editing and everything to be done. But let's take, yes. Yes.
There's a question online.
Yes.
It says, "Hi Shane, what motivated you to create the piece? And when did you start doing the work that you're doing? What influenced it?"
And let's take the second question that we had right here, and then we'll answer the 2 together. And that will be...
Okay. So what motivated me to do the piece was actually the tape collage project that I worked on earlier this year, and wanting to expand on that and invite more collaborators. That project I did in hard lockdown alone and played many instruments, but I wanted to expand on that and invite some amazing musicians from around South Africa. So that was really it, and see what that would generate to push me into new areas, new ideas, new spaces that are different to how I normally work. The one with Zayan was because I'm a big fan of her work, and we thought it would be very fascinating to delve into her work from a sort of sound lens. And what was the sort of second question? It was...
We're going to hear it now.
Okay, hi.
Yeah.
So it's a small comment and a question, also linking back to their comment. Just like I think this year has really brought about like a return to origin and like a return to like basics, you know. And I think it's really beautiful and inspired that like sound is vibration and we are vibration, like in the end. And like I really enjoyed how everything happened and like linked to like theatre in the round and theatre for ritual and theatre as a spiritual practice. And I just think that like you guys captured it really well, that life is a collage and it's like a happenstance, and whatever happens is what happens, and if it doesn't happen, then it didn't happen. So I just think that's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good. Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we see the musicians? Can I just ask the musicians and the collaborators who are here, so we can just give them also... Thank you. Thank you. Yes. And Pala, come up so people also can know the Thank you. There will be many more iterations of SO, different SO academies, and this has been a very encouraging and great, and thank you for all of you.
And we do have with Teresa Putimujela, we do have an only women a dance moment. There's 7 mentees, all women. There's a drummer and 2 singers, all women. And the mentor is Teresa Putimujela. It's just so we are aware of those, And our season 8 as well is created by only women.
So, where do we fit in?